Hi, I'm William, and this is Foil Driven. This week, I want to talk about some of my gear choices, why I'm using it, and I think you can categorize the style of the riding that I do on a foil assist, foil drive, Manta flow as, say, freestyle, maybe freestyle surf in some conditions. So let's talk about the equipment I use, the board size, the foil assist that I choose, and also the foil sizes. And I think that's a good place to start, is with the foil sizes. With this whole idea is catered to someone who's moved beyond just trying to get onto foil. Now you're ready to start, say, doing things in the riding in the waves, maybe trying some new tricks in the flat, maybe trying some jumps or spins or large wing outs. This is where these foil choices come from. And so I've got both large and small foils, and I would say that most of my foils now, if not all of them, are all high aspect. And high aspect now is kind of ranging from somewhere in the low 9s aspect ratio all the way up to close to 13 or above. And so most of my foils are around 10, and that gives you enough performance to get some speed and low drag, but not so much that it can't handle, say, wing outs, that it drops out if you get too slow. So I'm looking for sort of a medium stall speed. It handles well through the carves, goes rail to rail pretty quickly. And so right around 10, I've been finding that's a sweet spot for freestyle and with a foil drive or an assist like the flow. So the advantages of using, say, a larger foil, and for me that large foil would be around 1,300 centimeters square, somewhere in that range. A good example of that for me right now is the Evolution 205. It's got a lower stall speed, tons of glide. It's got a lot of lift early, but it still carries a pretty good speed, and it's pretty easy going rail to rail or carving. As long as the waves are relatively small, and I mean about chest high, you can still throw it around. My alternate is still pretty large. It's 1,000 centimeters square. That's going to be the Evolution 155. That's going to be much faster going rail to rail. It's going to have tighter carves. It's going to be easier to throw around. It's going to be slightly harder to get going. But on the larger waves, say when it starts getting chest high and above, jumping becomes a little bit easier. I could go smaller, and I probably will, especially on days when it starts getting a little bit bigger again. But here in summertime, 1,000 square centimeters is considered my small foil. I might drop down to, say, 900 or below when I get some waves. But until then, until I get waves, you just can't use the extra speed and ability to flick it back and forth really easily without that push from the wave. So in the summertime, I'm going with 1,000 square centimeters or the 205, which I think is around 1,300 square centimeters. Not all 1,300 or larger than 1,000 centimeter square foils are built the same. So if you're going in to do the stuff I do, double check that you can jump with the foil. I think for most prone, foil assist jumps, most foils can handle that. A lot of them have a no jump placard for jumping on wings where you're getting much more height, or heavier riders. I don't think a heavier rider is going to have that issue, because if you can't get it going in the first place, then it's not going to be that impact on a small jump with a big foil. But big foils do come with the idea that they could also tear up other things on your board. So like if you're jumping with a larger foil like my 205 and you have a board that's not built for it, it could rip the tracks right out. So just be aware, with freestyle does come a little bit of equipment. It's a little tougher on the equipment, and it's one of the reasons I sought out a sponsor, was to make sure that I could have access to quick repairs should I need to. So with that, I've been preferring the 205 to learn on because it's given me a little bit more cushion when I go to land. I can actually do one wingtip in first and feel out the landing before I put the whole foil in the water. It's just a little bit easier on small waves, but as you start to build speed, these foils with a lot of lift get a little bit more hard to handle when you're landing jumps on, say, something larger, like a larger, there's ways you can kind of slow down the landing so you don't carry speed, but what I'm shooting for in my riding is sort of a smooth ride out, so where it goes from the jump directly back into the ride. And so as the wave size starts to build, I like to switch down to my 155. Okay, let's talk about boards. I started learning all this stuff on a mid-length Jimmy Lewis, and I want to say it was around 45 liters and a little bit over 5 foot and maybe 18 or 19 foot or 19 inches wide. It was really good for learning landings because there's so much sort of surface area when you land that it gives you a little bit easier recovery. There's a lot of sort of deck space for trying strapless ollies. If something went wrong, I could, probably land on top of the board, even if I lost contact with the board in midair. So they have their advantages, these mid-sized boards, mid-lengths. They're easier to ride out of sloppy jumps. They're a little bit harder to jump because of the size, and that even more so for spins. There's a lot more just real estate. You're spinning around in the air, and the more you can kind of bring it in and tighten up your circle as you spin, the easier it is to spin. So it wouldn't be my first choice when I start doing spinning jumps. They may not have strap options. So like the Jimmy Lewis's I was on, no strap options on that one. They're more expensive, and they require more space. They're harder to transport. The bigger they are, the harder they are to fit into a car if that's what you're using. They're easier to catch a rail on a deep carve. But they're forgiving, they get up easy, and you can use these mid-sized boards with a much, much smaller foil because they get up and get going. They build speed, enough speed to get small foils going. So if you're shooting for a small foil in the flat or in small waves, the mid-length is the way to go. So prone boards are small, they're light, they're easy to throw around. Those answers are obvious. I think most people can look at it and see that. Which you might not, well, anybody who's tried it knows that a 30 liter is harder to get on foil and a larger foil size might be needed. The 205 is kind of my answer to that. So it'll get me going in flat water, but it's still easy to throw around and it helps me with the landing on the jumps. So prone has been my choice. Prone boards are less expensive than their mid-length counterparts. They're easier to ship. They usually have the option for straps. You can travel with them pretty easily. A lot of cars have room for a 4-foot board, but maybe not a 6-foot board or a 7-foot board. You do, if you're using, say, a foil assist, you got to be careful on these smaller prone boards because a lot of folks sort of get complacent and then their knees get caught in the prop because they hang over. I typically try to be pretty far forward on the board just so when it starts coming up on foil, I got a little bit more leverage to keep the nose down. But I've seen a lot of people, by a lot, I've seen 2 or 3 people bump their knee into the prop because they were using too small of a prone board, and that could be something you might not be worth the trade-off for you. And if it happens to me once, that'll probably be the last time I use a prone board. So buyer beware. Look out, you got a spinny, sharp thing below you if you're using a prone. So let's talk about the different foil assist options, and some which may not be on the market yet, but will probably be soon. You have, I think, 3 different categories, and that would be sort of like the very small, lightweight, which the foil drive slim and the Stoke fit into. There's another one coming on the market soon that's going to slide into that category, but it's going to be somewhat of an outlier, but keep an eye out for changes in the market. But you have with the foil drive slim and Stoke, you have a small, compact, it's closer to the natural feeling. So if that's what you're trying to do is have sort of the prone foil surf experience with minimal, interruption, then these are great choices. They're good for prone surfers that intend to pump out a lot. They just want something to help them get out to the waves, get started the first time, and then they pump around the rest of the time. something like the Slim is probably the way to go. I think you have a middle category where the foil drive occupies. And by foil drive, I mean their max and their HP max. And this is the choice most people are gonna make. It's a split between sort of the lightweight you get with the Stoke or the Slim and the higher capacity that you might see from things like a Lift X or the Manta. I think most people can get around 40 to 50 minutes out of like a max battery on the foil drive, and that's probably relatively conservatively riding. So if you're just mashing the throttle, you might get a little bit less than that, and I'd say probably around 35 minutes, maybe 40 if you're lucky. And that brings us to the next category, which is like the takeoff flow, and to more of an also the Lift X. I'm going to put in this category, but I think Lift X is just one bump higher than that, but it's sort of on the heavy end of the assist market, but you're going to get 60 to 90 minutes. For me, I can mash the throttle for at least 45 minutes to an hour and do jump after jump, fall after fall, keep getting back up and trying again and again. I'm very efficient getting on foil, so, you know, with all these systems, if you don't get that part down, you won't get these ride times. But if you can get onto foil quickly with something like the takeoff, I'm getting between 50 minutes to an hour and a half of solid riding. That's not laying on the water waiting to catch a wave. That's just nonstop riding, jumping, hitting the waves. Sometimes a little bit of pumping in there, especially on an hour and a half ride. The takeoff flow, it's got a built-in battery, so you're only going to get one charge out of that, for say 60 to 90 minutes when you go to the beach. For me, I live across the street from the beach. Pretty easy ride, come back, charge it back up, using it. If you've got a fast charger, it's about an hour charge, and then go back at it. But if you're on the beach, you could ride this for about an hour and a half, take an hour break, get something like an EcoFlow, set it on the EcoFlow on a charge, and then go back out an hour later. It's a little less convenient, but it's also more convenient at the same time. So it's more convenient that most of the time you ride, most days I ride, I'm only going to use 60 to 90 minutes anyway. I don't have to come back in at all to change out batteries. I don't have to worry about conserving throttle or anything like that. I can just mash it, have fun with it for an hour and a half, and then bring it back in and charge it. That solution works great for me. It's a little bit heavier, not entirely heavier, but for me, I would say the difference being is when I downsized to this 30-liter Foil the World board and the torque mast and the unifoil kit itself, when I downsized to that one, I lost more weight in the exchange of the new equipment than I did, it's lighter now than my foil drive was with, say, my Axis setup. And so with that, I don't feel any difference. Matter of fact, it's lighter. I can pump this thing around more. So I'm pretty happy with this rig the way it is. And it's like, for me, it's like the perfect flat water freestyle rig. 30-liter board. I weigh 185 to 190 pounds. The combo of the 155 and the 205 is a great combo. That torque mast is just amazing. I get no flex with it with what I'm doing, so it's a combination of lightweight and stiffness, perfect for what I do. So, of course, this is my ride, so I'm going to recommend it, but it was sort of handpicked by the folks at Unifoil for me. I think they'd watched a few of my videos and figured out this is probably going to suit what I do the best, and I agree. It works great. Now, one other thing about the Manta takeoff flow, it's the battery systems. So the battery systems on the Slim is probably the smallest and least capacity, going all the way up to, actually the Gen 1 foil drive is the smallest capacity. That was an 8S battery, meaning it was eight cells in series, stacked 3 layers deep. The flow in comparison is a 12S 4P, which means it's got 4 rows of 12 batteries run in series, which which gives you a ton of power and capacity. And that's apparent in the ride times, but it's also apparent in no sag all the way through the battery. I can get up just as well at the beginning of the battery as I can at the end of it. And there is a lot of power in reserve. And if you conserve these things, you could easily do, 2 or 3 hours if that's what your goal was. I've ridden probably 13 miles shore runner, back and forth, upwind and back, no problem with this system. The next level up, I'd say this system, my system now probably weighs somewhere, high 20s, low 30s. The next system up, the next layer, would be something like the Lift X, which I'm told that's 49 pounds, but the power and the capacity of that system puts it on another level. And I think I hope to see some more competition in this segment of the market where you can put straps on that Lift X and you have the power of an Efoil, but sort of like the dimensions and motor configuration of an assist. I'd like to see more of that. I haven't tried the Lift X yet, but that one might be more competition for something like the Takeoff Flow than, say, a foil drive, where I think the foil drive has modular batteries that you can remove. So does the Lift X. Out of all of them, Takeoff's the only one you can't change out the battery, but I don't know. It just the Lift X will be, I think it's going to push performance e-foils, and where the rest of these are kind of performance assists. I think there's a market for performance e-foils, but I don't think it's totally hashed out yet. So I'm looking forward to that. I'd like to see that market kind of evolve to where it's not just people cruising and beautiful sunsets. I'd like to see some more performance in the e-foil section. So hopefully this market opens up a little bit. All right, that was a lot to take in. That's a lot to digest. Let's go through the summary points to help you decide. So, big versus small. If you're gonna ride a bigger board, like a mid-length board, you can ride smaller, faster foils that are easier to turn. However, smaller foils, higher stall speed, and you may not be able to take advantage of that performance in flatter conditions or smaller conditions. So in smaller conditions, flat water, maybe go with a larger foil, with a lower stall speed, a little bit easier to jump, a little bit easier to get up, and sort of more maneuverable in the fact that you can ride a small tail, large foil, small board. It's still pretty easy to maneuver, but there's a lot of fun tricks you can do with the large foil, and I think that's kind of why I enjoy those. So my preferences are, say, a small board like the 30-liter Foil of the World, and a fast foil, but not necessarily the smallest foil I can get my hands on. And I choose the Takeoff Flow because it has a lot of capacity and a lot of power, and I don't have to keep coming back in for to change out batteries. I don't have to conserve. I can just give it my all and then come back in. That probably brings up more questions than it does provide answers. That being said, drop your questions in the comments. I'm usually pretty good. I answer them within a day or two in most cases. Thank you all for the continued support. I'm getting a lot of help from the outside now for content and creation, and that's because you all are actually watching this stuff. So I appreciate you. Thanks again. This has been Foil Driven.